Who are the truckers and what exactly do they want? Today, I talked to one of the very few legacy media journalists who has bothered to go to the protest, to talk to the truckers, and to seek to answer these very important questions. I'm Candice Malcolm, and this is The Candice Malcolm Show. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning into the podcast. So we continue to look at the Freedom Convoy in Ottawa, continue to try to look closely at it and answer some of the questions that are being neglected and failed to be asked by the legacy media. Yesterday on the show, we tried to tackle the question of why the legacy media tried to smear this convoy. Why were they so quick to assume the very worst about the protesters? And why did they fail to cover the protest in good faith? I was joined by Jonathan Kay, who is the editor over at Colette. Great interview. I encourage you to go check that out. Today, I want to ask another meaningful question that is being neglected and failed to be questioned or answered by the legacy media. And that is finding out who these truckers are. Who are they as individuals? What has motivated them to get to this point? Why are they at this breaking point? And why are they doing what they're doing, which is something that's frankly out of character for people who are used to just keeping their head down, working hard, doing what they have to do to survive. They're taking an extraordinary length. They're getting involved in the political and democratic process in a way that they probably haven't ever before in their life. So who are these truckers and what exactly do they want? What is it that they're trying to accomplish by being on Parliament Hill and being in the midst of this standstill? So the media were very quick to jump onto Justin Trudeau's petty, divisive, partisan attacks about the truckers. They assumed that those were true. They assumed that these truckers were dangerous. They were extremists. They were radical. They were racist. They were part of the far right. Well, my guest today is challenging all of those very assumptions. And in a recent piece that she wrote, a beautifully written and beautiful photographs that she wrote for Barry Weiss's Substack, she refutes some of these claims and tries to understand more about these truckers, paints a totally different picture of them. And so I am very pleased today to be joined. My guest today is Rupa Subramanya. She is a freelance journalist. She's a columnist over at the National Post. She used to write for the Wall Street Journal, Foreign Policy magazine, and she is a distinguished fellow at the Asia Pacific Foundation of Canada. Rupa lives in Ottawa, and like I said, she was one of the few journalists who bothered to go in and take a closer look at these truckers. So, Rupa, thank you so much for joining the podcast. It's great to have you.
Thanks for having me, Candice. It's great to be here.
So you live in Ottawa and you have been covering these protests very closely. So I want to ask you, how did it feel for you to go into the crowd and what is your impression of these truckers?
Well, when I first got there on the first Saturday of the protests, I went with it keeping an open mind. I'd read all of the news stories about some of the more unpleasant aspects of the convoy. That there are some people attached to the movement who have white supremacist views and they wanted to topple the government and so I'd read all of these stories. I went with it just I wanted to check it out for myself as a resident of the city. I wasn't going there as a journalist or as a columnist. I just really wanted to see what was going on and make up my own mind. So my first impressions were that it was like a carnival-like atmosphere. I have never seen anything like this in Ottawa. It was, there were people dancing. Of course, you had the sound of honking trucks, the trucks honking, but it was a carnival-like atmosphere. My first impression was that this looks a bit like Canada Day. I couldn't believe just how many people had shown up, on an extremely cold day. We had multiple extreme cold warnings from Environment Canada, frostbite within minutes of exposure, and I felt it. I have a fairly good jacket, and I'm very active outdoors in the winter, but that day was bitterly cold. And so that was an important part of what I'd observed, that there was commitment. These people were not showing up because the weather was good. The weather was nice. It was warm, but it was cold. And you had, I think Ottawa police estimated that about 8 to 10,000 people showed up on that first day. And that's extraordinary for this time of year, and that too in such extreme weather conditions. As I made my way through the crowd, I noticed that there was a fair bit of diversity. Of course, the overwhelming demographic characteristic of this protest is white. But we're overwhelmingly white in this country. There's nothing wrong with that. But I did notice Sikh Canadians, I noticed Chinese Canadians, I noticed Black Canadians, I noticed Indo-Canadians, I noticed First Nations, and people from Quebec, people from Alberta, people from Manitoba. These are people who've driven long distances to get here, to make their voices heard. And so the diversity of it was the other aspect of it. What was really striking was the friendliness of it all. You cannot walk through those streets without someone making eye contact with you and smiling, or just random people just coming up to you and giving you a hug. There was a woman who had a "Hug Me" placard on her back. And there was a spontaneous hugging of people, and it was electric. The atmosphere was electric. There was music, there were block parties, and there were DJs spinning tunes, there were people dancing. It almost felt like, there was this great unleashing of all of the stress and worries that people had been carrying for the last 2 years or so, especially those who have felt ostracized because of their vax status, or the fact that they're unvaccinated. I spoke to people who are vaccinated, but showed up in solidarity with those who are unvaccinated, because they oppose the mandates. They find them divisive. They find it discriminating. I was really struck on the first day at seeing many people carrying a copy of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. That was very, very. So for me, I was thinking, well, why would insurrectionists be carrying the Charter of Rights and Freedom? What is up with that? But I saw a lot of people doing that, and I saw messages of hope, peace, unity. I did not see the swastika flags or the Confederate flags. I looked for them. I'm not denying that they were there. I'm not denying that they showed up at the protest. I just didn't see it myself. But that quickly disappeared. Look, they've been around for 10 days. And apart from those first couple of days where these flags were spotted across the city, it was that one truck that kept driving around with a Confederate flag. I'm sure you've seen that image as well. And there was this other image of someone carrying a swastika flag. Those images, those people haven't shown up. I haven't seen anything like that. In fact, what's happened is the movement has gotten really big. It almost, I hate, it almost sounds like it's inclusive. It's inclusive of so many different types of people. It's inviting. Their soup kitchens have popped up all over downtown Ottawa. I just walk around. I can grab a cookie. I can get a burger. I can get a hot dog. It's all free. I see them feeding a lot of homeless people around here. The downtown core is, has several homeless shelters, and some of them have been doing really badly during the pandemic. And so, it was nice to see them being fed and being taken care of. They've joined in the protest as well. I've seen them dancing. I've seen them happy, which is extraordinary. There was something nice about that. We just, I also say this, as someone who lives in the city, I often just don't even pay attention to them. I just walk by them. But the last few days I've stopped to see the expressions on their faces, and they seem happy. They're being, people are speaking to them, people are inviting them to their to these block parties. It's all very inclusive, and there's a party-like atmosphere every day.
Wow. So just to sort of unpack what you just said, because so much of the things that you said in your own experiences, your own sort of eyewitness understanding of the convoy is in such stark contrast to the legacy media narrative and the things that Justin Trudeau says. We hear from legacy media that these people are stealing from the homeless. You're describing that they're helping care for the homeless. The media try to characterize the whole group by a few French people who showed up for one day and didn't come back. So it's interesting. I want to pick up on some of the things that you wrote about in your piece, because I just thought it was so powerful. So first of all, you spoke to over 100 protesters gathered in the nation's capital. And you write that what's happening is far bigger than the vaccine mandate. And one of the themes that I noticed in your piece, Rupa, is that you talk about how these people feel invisible, that they feel ignored, that they feel that the elites don't understand them. And I was wondering if you could expand on that. One of the lines you wrote, the elites, the people who have Zoomed their way through the pandemic, it's kind of funny because you and I are on Zoom right now. And so I think we fit into that later category. However, I think unlike sort of the elites that they're talking about, I think that you and I try to have a better understanding of what it's like for other people who haven't been able to have the luxury of working from home easily. Like some people have had to work through the pandemic. And so you write, the elites had better start paying attention to the fentanyl overdoses, the suicides, the crime, the despair, or else. So what else is the protest about, aside from just wanting to end the mandates, wanting to have their freedom back? And you sort of write, the elites had better start paying attention, or else. So I wonder if you could expand on that a little bit.
Well, it is principally about opposing the mandates. You speak to anyone here, the truckers, the protesters, they just want the mandates gone. They want to be left alone. They want their medical status to be private. They see that infringement of their privacy. They see this as they want to stand up for their bodily autonomy. What was striking about the conversations I had with some of these people is that they're not anti-vaxxers, not all of them. Many of them have actually taken other vaccines. They take the flu shot, they take tetanus shots, they take travel-related vaccines, but they just don't want to take this particular vaccine because, for one thing, they feel that it hasn't been out for too long. Number two, they feel that it's the messaging around it has been very confusing. It's been caught up in politics. The rhetoric around it is divisive, and they just feel uncomfortable being part of that, and so it's just sorry, I'm just losing my train of thought. So
just asking about what is it what do they
so they principally want the mandates to be dropped. That's what they want principally, but there is something bigger going on. They see that the last few years they have been ignored, that they feel like they're an underclass. They feel that government overreach has been extraordinary over the years. They find that they're increasingly feel like they're a prisoner in their own country. They can't say this. There's a culture of political correctness. They're afraid of being doxxed on social media. Several of the people that I spoke to were uncomfortable sharing their last names, for example, and that was very interesting. And I asked them, why, what are you so afraid of? You're here standing up to the government, which is right there. Why won't you give me your last name? And they genuinely fear a government reprisal. They genuinely fear, people taking their names, reporting them to their employers, getting them fired. And some of that has been happening over the last few days. And so there's genuine concern about a collusion, what they see as a collusion between government, big pharma, big tech, and they're all coming together they're coming together and ganging up on them, essentially. And so freedom, that's what they're here for. That's what you hear. That's what you hear. Yes, it's principally about opposing the mandates and ending all restrictions, ending the mask mandates, and no more lockdowns, no more restrictions. But it's about freedom, and that's how I would distill it down to, because that's what you keep hearing constantly throughout, day in and day out. The flags, it's all about freedom. We're here for our freedom. We're here for our children's future. We want our children's future to not have this divisiveness. They're here for unity, which is another interesting theme of the protests. They're tired of the divisiveness. They feel that there's been a ratcheting up of that. The rhetoric from our politicians has been, has gone up, and it's created divisions in the country, and they want to see an end to that. So that's pretty much, that's how I would, I would say that it's bigger than the mandates, but it's principally about freedom.
It's interesting. I mean, they're not the only ones who think that the vaccine policies has become divisive. I mean, two members of Justin Trudeau's own Liberal caucus have come out and said the exact same thing in recent days. And I'm not surprised also that they fear that they don't want to give their name because they fear repercussions, because you have journalists online saying, let's report the license plate numbers, let's call the insurance companies, let's make sure that these people lose their jobs and lose their livelihood. So I think that they're fear is justified given what is happening in this situation. I want to pull one other quote that you wrote, Rupa, because it's so interesting. You wrote that if Trudeau sauntered down to the mess of the rigs on Wellington Street, if he talked to these people for a few minutes, he would understand it will not stop. What's happening in Canada right now is bigger than the mandate. So what did you mean by it will not stop? I mean, you're in Ottawa right now. We're kind of at an impasse, a standstill. It seems like the police are really cracking down, and Trudeau really wants these guys out right now. But we get the feeling, I get the feeling that this is so much broader than just even the folks in Ottawa, right? We saw the Ambassador Bridge in Windsor and Detroit completely shut down. We see another convoy out in Alberta on the Coutts border with Manitoba that are doing the exact same thing. Over the weekend, last weekend, we saw huge rallies all over the country: Quebec City, Victoria, Calgary, Winnipeg, Toronto. I mean, I get the feeling that this isn't ending and it's not going anywhere, but I'm interested in what you think, because you wrote it will not stop. So what did you mean by that?
It will not stop until the mandates are dropped. That is what everybody has been saying, this is where they draw a line in the sand. For them, this divisiveness has to stop. They see vaccine mandates as discriminating. They see the vaccine passport system as a tool to ostracize them, as publicly shaming them. What is missing from the reportage, unfortunately, are the stories of these people. They're real people. They've been hurting. They've been bottling up these frustrations, the anger, for the last 2 years, and more so in the last few months since we've had the vaccines and the vaccine passport system came into being. They've had an awakening. That's how I would describe it. They've had an awakening. Many of these people didn't really care for politics. They didn't really have any time for it. They're too busy, driving their trucks. They're busy at their jobs. They're frontline workers, like grocery store workers. They're nurses. I've even met some civil servants who've been suspended without pay, I think, or with pay. I'm not sure what that.
I think it's without pay. Exactly. I think it's without pay if you're unvaccinated. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And they're hurting, and they're hurting, and while they're hurting, we're heaping on this abusive rhetoric on them by calling them racist, fringe, unacceptable views. what is so unacceptable about someone who just wants to dine at a restaurant where she works? Someone who was, their lives have come to a standstill. They were avid travelers at one point, but they feel like they're a prisoner in their own country because they can't get on a plane and go see their families in Greece or Italy or in India. Some of them haven't seen their families in 3 years, and that is likely going to continue as long as the vaccine mandate is in place. And so they've had there's been an awakening, that's how I would describe it, of their rights, of their freedom, how important this is to them, and that they're going to fight for it no matter what. But they all, I should say, they're all peaceful. They'll follow all of the processes in place. They're not here to overthrow the Trudeau government. They're not. That is not their objective. They just want the truckers and the protesters. Really, just want the mandates to go, and then they say we'll leave, and we just want to get back to work. Keep in mind that many of these people, some of the truckers are actually still working. They're here on vacation time. Some people have taken time out from their work, and so this is, or from their families even. And so they would like to go back to their lives. It's not exactly a vacation here if you're sitting in your truck. I don't know if you've been inside one of these big rigs, but I did. They're very difficult to get into. Some of them come equipped with a bunk bed. It's a tiny little space, but imagine spending 10 days in that, day in and day out. You're just sitting in your truck doing nothing. The truckers will say, look, we're used to this. This is what we do for a living. We live in our trucks, essentially. Sometimes our families come with us, but it is quite extraordinary. They're not moving anywhere. They're just stuck in the same spot. So that's I think that's what they're standing up for, freedom, their freedom, and they also say that I'm standing up for your freedom. It's not just about me. I'm fighting for all of us. I'm not going to stop till we're heard. And what is extraordinary about this so far is that Prime Minister Trudeau refuses to meet them. The organizers, even yesterday when I attended the presser, are still open to dialogue, but they haven't even been acknowledged by the government. No one's reached out to them, and so. So I think this is not a good situation in my view. I'm all for dialogue. I think the government needs to meet them. I think that should have happened last week. At least hear what they have to say. The impression I got on the first day when I came home, and I spent all day at the protest, and I came home in the evening, and I came home and I told my partner, they've really misjudged this moment. There's something bigger going on here. Our political class is, are completely disconnected from what is happening here. And this is going to backfire, and this is going to have political repercussions. It's going to change the political landscape, whether anyone likes it or not. I tweeted this, and several mainstream media journalists pounced on me and said, this is just a fringe group of people. It's like a PPC gathering. But it just got bigger. And it just got bigger. It got more diverse, and here we are. And within a couple of days of the protest, Erin O'Toole had to resign, and now we have a leadership race. So it's happening. You've had already 2 Liberal MPs from Quebec who've spoken out against the mandates and the divisive rhetoric. And I think it's just going to keep getting bigger, in my opinion.
I think you're right. I think that anyone who sort of dismisses this as just another sort of PPC rally. I mean, we've been having freedom rallies throughout the entire pandemic. We've seen them in Toronto. We saw lots and lots of rallies during the federal election. But what was happening during this convoy just felt different right from the beginning. When you saw Canadians go out on overpasses and you would just see those images of overpass after overpass after overpass, I think that inspired the truckers as well. And they started to realize that, when the kids were handing out cookies with handwritten notes and you had all the kids calling in and thanking the truckers, the story went around the world, and I think it inspired people all over the world to say, look, here you have mild-mannered, law-abiding Canadians standing up and saying enough is enough. When the Canadians are the ones that are, willing to go to these extreme lengths, you can tell that they're at their breaking point. And I think that public opinion has started to shift. I mean, I can point to half a dozen public policy changes that have happened just since this convoy. I mean, you mentioned that we had the leader of the Conservative Party replaced. That is a direct result of the convoy and his inability to address it in a meaningful way and respect the truckers enough to meet with them. We had 2 Liberals come out against their own Prime Minister. I don't think that's happened, Rupa, since Justin Trudeau was elected, aside from the members that he ejected, Jody Wilson-Raybould and Jane Philpott. But sitting members of caucus from Quebec, those are his allies, speaking out against him. Alberta dropped their vaccine mandate program. Saskatchewan dropped their vaccine mandate program. Manitoba announced that they are loosening restrictions. Restrictions will be eased in Prince Edward Island starting on February 19th. Quebec planned to lift its pandemic restrictions in mid-March. They also eliminated the plan that they had to have an additional tax levy on people who were unvaccinated. So we're starting to see this tide of public opinion change. There's been a couple of major studies that have come out, one from Johns Hopkins showing lockdowns didn't really work. We've also seen a lot of public opinion polling. There was a Leger poll that found that 44% of Canadians sympathize with the frustrations of the convoy. We also saw an Abacus poll that found really, really remarkably, the overwhelming majority of Canadians think that Justin Trudeau has handled this situation either poorly or very poorly. And interestingly, I don't know if you saw this, but Joe Biden's press secretary, Jen Psaki, was asked about the truckers. And she said that she respected them and that they have a right to peaceful protest. And she was quite positive about them, almost like it's just such a stark difference with Trudeau. And I think that she sees the potential of this trucker convoy to come to the U.S. and wreak havoc, and the American Democrats rely a lot more on working class voters than the Liberals do in Canada. So I thought that was really interesting, and I think that more and more people see the truckers as sort of a mantle for freedom, and they're starting to side with them more than Trudeau. What do you think is next for Trudeau? What do you think Trudeau should do? What will he do? And how can he sort of salvage a situation that seems like he's in a pretty bad place right now?
He's got to, he has to meet them. He has to try to diffuse the situation because this can't go on indefinitely. And that should have happened last week, as I mentioned earlier. But instead, as recently as a couple of days ago, he doubled down on the divisive rhetoric. He once again mentioned the swastikas and the Confederate flags, which, as I mentioned, I'm sure they were there. Well, I haven't seen them, but they haven't returned
I don't know about plural. I don't think that you could say swastikas, because from best I can tell, there's one guy with the swastika flag, and I think that maybe there was someone else who drew one on a sign, but it wasn't like that was what you could classify the entire protest. I mean, there's thousands of Canadian flags. It's like, how can you see thousands of Canadian flags, one Nazi flag, and assume that everyone there holding a Canadian flag is a Nazi? It's so absurd.
No, it is, and I was struck by that as well. And it's unfortunate that that's how it ended up being portrayed. But Prime Minister Trudeau really needs to speak to them. They're open for dialogue. What is extraordinary about this is that these people are being called occupying forces, rebel forces. I've seen journalists refer to them that way, as though I don't know what occupying force or rebel force would be interested in having a dialogue, but that's what they've been saying. We want to speak to the prime minister. Let him. Why doesn't he hear us? Why does he continue to pour scorn on us? And here's one thing, Candice, and I wrote this recently for the National Post. That there is room for compromise. So we have Prime Minister Trudeau, if you've noticed, has doubled down on the vaccines or nothing, and has doubled down on vaccines or nothing. We have therapeutics. We in this country, we do not recognize recovery from COVID. Germany does. I think Switzerland does, a lot of Denmark does, a lot of European countries recognize recovery from COVID. But we've taken an extraordinary position here that vaccines are the only thing that is going to get us out of the pandemic. Given the fact that most of us are vaccinated, I'm triple vaccinated. I've also recovered from Omicron recently, but so I'm not. I urge people to get vaccinated. I think you should. I think it does. I believe in the science. I think it does prevent you from. It prevents you from winding up in the ICUs. I do believe in that. But we've taken a very extreme position here that if you are not vaccinated, you're not going to get out of the pandemic. Given the fact that we're a country that has had one of the highest vax rates in the world. And what is also happening here is that Canada is increasingly an outlier among developed Western countries, where they're seeing the end game of the pandemic. They're getting so yesterday New York got rid of indoor mask use. Europe is getting rid of some European countries are dismantling the vaccine passport system, like Switzerland, and what is extraordinary here is that we're doubling down on these things, and we're not recognizing a recovery from infection, which I think is an important step to take. I think it would be something that should come from our public health officials. I'm not sure why they refuse to do that. Several of the people that I've met at the protests have had COVID. I don't know if you're aware of a recent CDC study that came out saying that people who've recovered from COVID have very high antibodies, even higher than those of us who've been vaccinated. So why is it that we don't do that? Why is it that we don't recognize natural immunity, which is as old as time itself? It's extraordinary that we've put everything on vaccines, but we've ignored everything else that could be testing. Why are we so behind in testing? Yesterday, I saw a news report that if you live in Ontario, you can now finally get these rapid tests by walking into a pharmacy or a grocery store. The rest of the world, including India, where I originally come from, that's been the case for more than a year. What is going on? Who's responsible for it? Is it the feds? Is it the provincial governments? Why are we so behind on something as basic as rapid tests? Because
rapid tests was something that could have been a lot more useful during the previous Delta waves. I'm not even sure that it accurately will let you know whether you have Omicron or not. I've heard really competing stories in my own family. We had to test my son like 5 times, even though we knew that he had COVID. We knew he'd been exposed to a swim coach, and he was showing the symptoms, and he kept testing negative on these rapid tests. And we finally took him in for a PCR, and it was positive. I don't even know why we bothered, because it was just, I guess, peace of mind to confirm it. But I've had just even in my own household so many weird instances where someone's positive one day and negative the next day. It's like I'm not sure how accurate those are, but I get your point that Canada just seems to be really dead set on vaccines and not looking at even sort of the underlying health issues. I took issue with Trudeau, his former health minister. I'm not sure if she's still the health minister, Patty Hajdu, but she said that she didn't recommend people take vitamin D supplements, which is really, really puzzling, given what we know about a number of people who have COVID who also have vitamin D deficiencies. And there have been lots of studies. And so the fact that she's telling people not to take vitamin D supplements is just curious, because it's like, why wouldn't you tell people to do everything they can to be healthy? Go outside and get exercise, get some fresh air, make sure you eat a healthy diet, take vitamin D supplements. We live in the north and we don't get a lot of sun during the winter. Like, it just seems like some of those basic messages have never been communicated to the public.
In fact, what is striking is that, and I have doctors in my family, and they say, what is missing from the messaging here from our public health officials is that nobody even talks about trying to be healthy, trying to stay fit, trying to, so you close gyms, which is extraordinary when, that could actually help you, give you the tools to fight COVID if you were to get it. So we've had it completely backwards. For example, gyms in the UK were open during Omicron. We closed everything down. The first sign of trouble here, we shut everything down, like the Rideau Center, which has been closed indefinitely, but the businesses around it are open. So I think it's important that our political class, our political elites, principally Prime Minister Trudeau, they need to really think long and hard about what is happening in the country right now, and listen to, and pay attention to the frustrations of these individuals. You're the Prime Minister of all Canadians, not just those who voted for you, and these frustrations are real. And some of the stories are heartbreaking, and he really needs to diffuse the situation, go and speak to the convoy organizers, hear them out, chart out a plan. What is happening right now is that we don't seem to have an end game in sight. Yesterday, the health minister in Ontario refused to tell us when we're going to get out of this. This roadmap is all well and good, but it doesn't really get us back to 2019, does it? When the rest of the world is moving in that direction. So it raises questions. Why? What is going on here? What are we so afraid of? We're what is it? 80% or more double vaccinated here. And
Trudeau said yesterday that 9 out of 10 Canadians are now vaccinated.
So vaccines are a way out of the pandemic. So what is that going to be now? I mean, 110%. I'm not sure. But I'll also tell you, Candice, that what I've also now seen is that and I've been noticing it. This is even before the protesters and the convoy arrived in Ottawa. People who are triple vaccinated are living in fear. They're walking around with masks outdoors. I never thought that I would see that. I get it. I mean, as long as the mask mandate isn't in place, I'm going to wear a mask wherever I go. But I certainly will not wear a mask when I'm outdoors, because that just it's just crazy. Being outdoors is what they've been telling us. Being outdoors is better than being indoors.
Well, we've known that since the very beginning of the pandemic, that COVID doesn't really spread outside. I'm not sure about Omicron, but we saw that with our own Prime Minister. He's triple vaxxed. He just recovered from COVID, and he's standing outside wearing a mask. It's like, how are we supposed to believe that vaccines get us out of the pandemic when you've had COVID? You're vaccinated, you still had COVID, like so many other Canadians. I know so many Canadians that are double, triple vaxxed, still got COVID, including everyone in my household. And yet here you are, still wearing a mask, still imposing all of these things. So it's really hard to believe him when he doesn't even live up to what he's saying. His rhetoric doesn't match his own actions.
And those images are powerful when you see the Prime Minister of the country at a press conference outside, and there's really no one else around. There's a lot of distance between him and whoever is there, but he's still wearing a mask. He's triple vaccinated and recovered from COVID. That people see that, and the triple vaccinated, I find, are more fearful than the unvaccinated, which is extraordinary. And you see that here. You can spot the triple vaccinated or the double vaccinated and the ones who are unvaccinated. It's the unvaccinated who are dancing and smiling and hugging everybody everybody. It's the double, triple vaccinated who are walking around in masks, looking grumpy, their shoulders, stooped, and, they're slouching, and you can see them, you can spot them. And, so it tells me that there's I don't know how big this is, how big their numbers are. It tells me that some people are just not ready to say goodbye to the pandemic. Now, how much of that is reflected in the decisions that our politicians are making, I don't know, because at the end of the day, they're also humans. They're also, susceptible to the fear and concerns about going back to normal life, but it is quite extraordinary, and so I think going back to your question, I do think that Prime Minister Trudeau, it's time for him to speak to them. This is not a good look for the country, Candice. I'm getting messages from people all over the world saying, what is going on? I mean, he's why doesn't he talk to them? Why doesn't he speak to them? Why doesn't he engage with them? What is going on in Canada? And you mentioned Joe Biden's press secretary. I think there's another element to this. Politicians everywhere else are watching this, and I think they're taking notes, and they're saying, look, I don't think it's a good idea for us to double down the way Justin Trudeau has, because we're going to see mass protest movements here as well, and that's not something we want to deal with right now. And that, I'm sure that's happening, and I think that's probably because of the truckers. And but again, we're an outlier here. I don't know what the thinking here is. I don't know how Trudeau comes out of this. How this is advantageous for Trudeau politically. I remember early on in the protests, several people were saying, "Oh, this is, Trudeau is going to win a majority in the next election. This is a done deal because these people have managed to do that." I'm not so sure about that anymore. I think public opinion, the narrative is changing. It's changing, and even people who are skeptical, questioning the protests, are tired of the restrictions. They do want to go back to normal life, and they want to put this behind them. And ironically, that is what the truckers and the protesters want. They want their lives back.
Well, it's so interesting to hear your perspective, Rupa, and I really appreciate not just coming on the show, because it's great to talk to you, but I appreciate the fact that you go out there, you go against the grain, you don't just do what everyone else in the legacy media does, and you really sought to tell the other side of the story. So it's great to have you on the show. I appreciate your time. That's Rupa Subramanya. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Candice. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. All right. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Candice Malcolm, and this is The Candice Malcolm Show.